Sacred Earth Promise. This is probably going to be the roughest, most difficult review I've ever had to give a game. The reason being is I know this is a passion project of the devs. It has a long history, and there are several other games that are coming out that are sequels of or directly related to this one. I also hate being overly negative, but there's a lot to pick at this one. Okay, look. The main thing I want to get across is that Sacred Earth Promise is a decent game. It's got interesting, quirky characters, has some decent puzzles in the explorable maps, uses an interesting dungeon explore board, and has some really, really amazing artwork. The problem with all that is that almost none of it really gels well with the other parts. This is a game that, at its core, has a lot of heart, but it lacks a solid cohesion. Okay, take the art as a prime example. I counted no less than four different distinct art styles being used in the game. Each were amazingly well done on their own, but why were there so many? I'm not sure if this was intentional or not, but it was jarring for the player. It pulled me out of the story instead of drawing me in. I can understand the effect they were trying for with the chibi-style sections, but even in visual novels and animes, those super deformed parts still match up with the general style of the base product. The writing also seemed to jump between different styles as well. Sometimes it would use large, antiquated words, then later the same character would talk in a simple, easy-flowing manner. Characterizations were a bit off as well. I felt like there was more than one writer, and they didn't collaborate on the different sections. One wanted to write a fun, quirky visual novel, while the other wanted to explore darker themes of loss and power. All in the same character. Then there's my favorite part, the combat. It's a style I've seen before in the game Crimson Shift, where attacks lead to combo chains and you build an EX gauge to unleash devastating attacks. It's also somewhat forgiving in that if a character dies, they could come back after 3 turns, providing you can survive that long. But the RNG combines with weaknesses and resistances that are not easily conveyed, and results in wildly varied amounts of damage. All in all, the combat was the most frustrating thing I had to deal with in this game, and I did not enjoy it at all. Just so you don't think this whole thing is just going to be gloom and doom and me crapping all over this game, there were several very, very good points to it. The artwork was amazing. Each different part looked great and fit whatever scene they were being used in. I just wish the differing styles worked a bit better together. It was an interesting and engaging story with a huge cast of named characters. There's unique dungeon exploring through the board and utilizing travel points. The travel points themselves can be used to boost your combat, avoid it, or avoid various traps within the dungeon. And I really liked how the gear was augmented by those ether gems to kind of cater more towards your specific playstyle that you wanted to go in. You can save during text. I've never seen that in an RPG Maker game before. It happens often with visual novels, so that's kind of the one thing from that side of things that I'm glad bled over into this game. These next few points weren't deal breakers for me, but I can understand how they would be for others. Once you leave an area, there's really no extra opportunities to grind up levels within that area. Once enemies are dead, they're dead forever, and once you leave that area from that story perspective, you're not going back to it. There was a lot of history in the game, and it can be a bit overwhelming. What I mean is, it always felt like I was missing part of the story. There were a lot of named characters, as I've mentioned, that seemed like they should be instantly recognizable to the player. And there was a sense that a bunch of the topics being discussed had already been elaborated further in previous games in the series. I constantly felt out of the loop, and it killed my engagement. A lot of the music in the game doesn't loop properly. It just fades to black, and then just starts again. And sorry for beating a dead horse, but I have to go over the bad stuff again. The combat is... honestly, it's punishingly difficult, and it relies way too much on RNG. I had some enemies that could one-shot my characters if I wasn't careful, and there is zero indication when there is a huge, heavy attack incoming. For example, the last boss killed my main character, Priel, I hope I'm saying that right, with a single attack. She was at full health, and the attack damage is almost 1.5 times that. There was no indication it was coming, and I have an ability, the Focus, which allows me to defend, regain some health, get some EP for attacks and whatnot, and less damage. No indication the huge attack was coming. I was one shot, lost the fight. The last dungeon it's too long. I was in it for almost 2 hours before finding the final boss, and there was a good chunk of it I left unexplored. The game, it mixes RPG and visual novel in some good ways, but a lot of bad ways. It seems to kind of pick the worst of both and add those in as well. The art styles clash, the writing seems to come from different writers in a lot of areas. It just feels like the whole game was made by several different people, and they all just submitted their parts at the end and called it a day. Basically, the RPG side is hampered by poorly balanced combat, and the visual novel side is affected by the differing art styles. I am really on the razor's edge with Sacred Earth Promise. I enjoyed a lot of the things it was trying to accomplish. I just wasn't expecting it to get so jumbled up in trying to deliver them. For me, this is probably going to be my first true neutral rating of a game. I know, that's incredibly lackluster. But so is this game after everything is kind of said and done. I mean, the differing art styles, the clunky mix of RPG and visual novel, the RNG-heavy combat. You know what? It's pretty much only the combat that dragged this title down for me. For all my complaints about being clunky and lacking cohesion, I can still look past all that because the game obviously comes from a place of love and care and has a lot of heart to it. It's quirky. The characters, they're engaging. I loved all the art, clashing or not. But the frustration from the combat, to do everything correctly and carefully only to get punished by bad RNG, the game is not worth the current price of $14.49 Canadian. I recommend it on sale only, or if you just want to help support the devs. I really hope they continue the series and create better games. They certainly have the heart and soul part of this down. I'm HawkZombie. Thanks for listening. There we have it, folks. Another review in the bag. Hope you enjoyed it. If you liked it, subscribe. Follow me on Twitch. If you really liked it, then throw me a sub on Twitch or join up to my Patreon account. Links are below.